Hello, my name is Liz Forsyth and I'm an accredited practicing dietitian, nutritionist, as well as an accredited sports dietitian. I'm so happy that you're taking the time to invest in yourself and to learn more about this low carb lifestyle and really look after yourself by taking charge of your health. The easy path is to certainly not make any changes at all. But if you're here, then I'm guessing that you're motivated to continue to make some changes or to learn more about how you can make this low carb approach more of a lifestyle. And I really commend you for that. Now, I've been in private practice for 20 years plus, and I focus mostly on metabolic health and weight loss for my clients, also fatty liver, diabetes, menopause, hormonal issues, all that sort of thing. And I've also had my own experiences with health issues, so I really know that this low carb lifestyle is an approach that works, and I do this myself. And today I'd like to discuss a topic that comes up a lot in various ways, and if it doesn't come up, I do believe it sits in the back of people's minds, and that is the concept of low carb, high fat or healthy fat being a diet. Now, for dietitians, this is a bit like the elephant in the room because we all know that diets don't work. Yet I'm sitting here and a lot of other health professionals here are advocating this low carb lifestyle. It's a different approach. It can be challenging to adopt, and yet it also claims to have all these magical cures for your health issues. Now, I know that these improvements in your health conditions are definitely real, but if we're going to make this low carb approach a lifestyle, it's really important that we look at what we're doing as not being a diet. So over the next 30 minutes or so, I'm going to spend some time outlining some ways in which me and my team approach Lchf in a non-diet way with our clients. And hopefully by the end, you'll get some ideas on how you can change your thinking to make this more of a long-term way of eating. At the very end, I'll also give you a bit of an idea of how we help our clients with our online program and some different ways that we achieve that. Now, one of the big reasons we don't want to think of this as a diet is that psychologically, and this has been well studied, we know that as soon as we look at something as being a diet, we create that all or nothing effect, and it makes us want the food that we can't have even more. Now, I'm going to share my screen with you for a moment. Okay, there we are. That's my team. Now, this slide here shows the dieting cycle, and some of you may have seen this before, and if not, then I'm sure that a lot of you can relate to it. This just shows the process that we undergo every time we think about dieting or applying some kind of food restriction. So I do think that this is relevant to if you feel you are restricting carbohydrates as well. And this is very much a process we want to try and avoid. So when we think about what we can't have, or we eat to the exclusion of certain foods, then it goes without saying that we undoubtedly start to want the thing that we can't have even more. So if you do think of yourself as going on a diet in applying the principles of Lchf, or if you're thinking of this as a quick fix, then you're likely to be setting yourself up for failure. And maybe not straight away. It might last a month or 2 months or 3 months, but most likely down the road, because the more restriction you apply, the harder it can feel. So let's talk about what we mean by the term low carb, healthy fat diet. And to do that, let's look at our definition of diet, because this is where some of the problem can be. Diet is noun and a verb. Number one, the diet can refer to the kinds of foods that a person, animal, or community habitually eats. And this refers to our way of eating. Now, this is opposed to diet also meaning a special course of food to which a person restricts themselves, either to lose weight or for medical reasons. So, when we're looking at a low carb, healthy fat diet or eating approach, try to think of the former. So low carb is now more the way you eat, rather than a specific food being something that you can or can't eat. And getting this mindset right, it can certainly affect your thought processes and your decisions that you make, which can ultimately determine how long you stay on this path for without becoming derailed. And it can also help to prevent some of the pitfalls that comes with dieting. And many of you have spent a lot of your time on and off diets. So this is very much the rat wheel that we want to get out of, because it's a self-perpetuating cycle. Now, I'm not a psychologist, but I have seen this to be true, certainly in my private practice. And the reason we can't stick with restrictive diets isn't because we lack willpower. The problem is with the actual diet itself, and in particular, the restrictive nature. So I'll just share my screen again. So in order to help sure we make this approach a non-diet, it can be helpful to redefine in your mind what healthy diet actually means, so that you're not defining your low carb eating style in your mind to be something that's restrictive. So first of all, change your definition of diet to mean the way you now eat. Second of all, we also want to reframe what healthy diet means. And it's only because we've been constantly told, and even that Australian healthy eating guidelines state that we should be eating a low fat, high whole grain and high carb diet, that by comparison, this Lchf is deemed to be in fact a diet. If we look at a healthy diet, meaning an approach to eating which is most beneficial to your human body, and especially in the case of underlying insulin resistance, I'd definitely argue that a lower carb, higher fat diet is in fact a healthy diet for you. And the third pillar, if you like, when it comes to making Lchf a non-diet, or your new low carb lifestyle, is based around not restricting, but just reducing your carbohydrate intake. So note that we're not necessarily limiting ourselves to a set amount of carbohydrates per day. And the definition of low carb diet is actually 130 grams of carbohydrate per day, which is still quite liberal. We're not strictly talking about achieving 20 to 40 grams of carbs per day, which is the case of achieving ketosis. But remember, 130 grams or less is the point where we're dialing down our insulin levels, which is the fat storing hormone. And that in turn helps us to achieve a better sense of satiety, to reduce food cravings, helps keep blood sugars under control, and essentially helps to improve our fat storing ability or reduce it. So an important principle that I apply and teach my clients is the 3 R's. Now I'll just show you my portion plate. If this is your plate, I want you to try and fill up half of your meal with the non-starchy vegetables. A quarter of your meal is the protein, and then the remaining segment is the carbohydrate. Now, just remember that this carbohydrate portion is optional. You can choose, and everyone needs to feel in control of their choices. You need to feel like you can choose whether to have that part or not. So the principle of the 3 R's that I teach my clients is, if you do choose to have this carbohydrate section, then simply reduce it. That's the first R. So reduce your serving of carbohydrates to no more than 1 serving at the meal. So that might be about a half a cup of rice or pasta or sweet potato or something like that. The next R is remove. If you choose, you can also remove it completely and just choose to have the protein and veggies, steak and salad, prawns and salad, or, stir fry or whatever with some kind of protein like tofu or something along those lines. So you can simply remove that if you choose to. And the third R is to replace. And this is where you can replace the carbohydrate portion, like rice, with a non-carbohydrate alternative, like the cauliflower rice or the pasta with the zucchini noodles. So the 3 R's is an important one to remember. And that way you don't need to feel like there's a food that you can't have or that you can't eat a particular meal. You've got the choice on how you're going to approach that meal balance. Okay. So let's look at the other fundamental principles of the non-diet approach. I'm going to share my screen again because I like to relate this to our low-carb lifestyle as well, just to keep that dieting mentality away. So this is around accepting and embracing your body's cues. And this is where I feel Lchf really works for a lot of people, because it's addressing the underlying metabolic issues which are causing you to crave food and overeat. It allows us to get more in tune with our body's eating cues. So this looks at hunger and fullness awareness. I like to talk with my clients about a hunger scale, so identifying the level of hunger and satiety before and after eating a meal. So the benefit of eating Lchf is that you get that improved satiety and signalling to the brain that you actually don't need food and you're full. And you can allow yourself to eat to satiety or feeling full, rather than feeling like you have to stop eating because you've met your calorie quota for that meal or snack. So pay attention to that, to the signal. Pay attention to the level of physical hunger. The next one is mindful eating, and that refers to using all your senses to pay attention to how the food tastes, how it makes you feel, and when you've had enough, so that you can trust yourself to stop and also eat certain foods without guilt, and that includes carbohydrate foods. The third one's building trust in your ability to act on body cues. I trust my body to tell me when to eat, what to eat, and how much to eat. This is about learning to accept, listen, and act on body cues without judgment or emotion. And part of this is being able to think about food in the context that if I can eat anything I want, including carbs, whenever I choose, the point is that I don't have to overdo it or even eat it right now. There's no urgency. The fourth one is identifying and reducing superfluous eating. Now, superfluous eating is the eating that occurs in the absence of physical hunger. And I love that the goal of Lchf is to eat to reach proper satisfaction. Maybe a meal's going to have more calories compared to a low-fat alternative, but if it keeps you satisfied for a long time and you're not looking for snacks in between meals, then you're still able to self-regulate your calorie intake for the day and lose weight if that's what your goal is. I also like to identify all the potential eating triggers with my clients, like eating because a certain food is there, or because it's 11 a.m, or because you like to have a snack every time you have a coffee. So to summarize those points, mindful eating plus recognizing your hunger and fullness gives you the ability to recognize those cues that your body is giving you to stop eating, and also to feel satisfaction with your meals. And this is regardless of the fact that you haven't eaten carbs, which we've been led to believe are so important. This is a photo of my son Connor, who at age 2, I think that's a classic example of intuitive eating, even with those extras. I mean, half of that's around his face, but he wouldn't necessarily eat the whole thing. It's more about enjoying the food. And then, as a 2-year-old does, when you've had enough, they stop generally. Now, the next thing I wanted to just show you is a few little slides outlining the difference between dieting and the non-diet approach. Let's go over a couple of these. The dieting is more about the external eating cues, like the time of the day or eating certain meal sizes. And a dieting approach would certainly be, I can only have 7 grams of carbohydrate per meal or so, versus the non-diet approach, which is more recognizing the internal cues. And again, that portion plate, balancing your meal and giving yourself the option to decide whether you're going to include the carbohydrates, whether you need it or don't need it, and how much of it you're going to have. The next one just shows the comparison between dieting, so the food rules, versus the food cues. Dieting tends to include more regular weighing and measuring and very structured components of meal planning, whereas the non-diet approach tends to go more on your internal cues. There's no good or bad food. It's how you put it together in terms of the whole day. And then this is some of the language that commonly crops up around dieting as well. So the dieting paradigm versus the non-diet paradigm. And you can see that there's a very stark difference between the type of language that's used, and whether you can or can't eat certain foods, whether you feel good or bad, whether you feel obsessed or compelled to eat, versus enjoying your food, being mindful and all of that sort of thing. So to summarize what we've touched on today, I really want you to compare Lchf to other restrictive diets, either that you've done in the past or that you're aware of. Because at first, it might seem that restricting carbohydrates is a restrictive diet, but due to the physiological effect, the metabolic effect on reducing appetite and insulin and improving satiety, and really controlling that physiological craving for food, it actually allows us to become much more in tune with our own internal physical hunger signaling, and recognizing our satiety cues. So when we aren't craving food and we're no longer looking at food and trying to exercise willpower, we can easily step back and then address our eating triggers, or the reasons why we eat when we're not hungry. We can plan those foods mindfully that we really want to include, that we like, maybe the ones that have carbohydrates, but we're more able to include them and then thoroughly enjoy them without the guilt. So when we look at Lchf this way, I would actually argue that it's the low-fat, high carbohydrate diets that are calorie controlled that tend to be the ones that feel more restrictive, because with Lchf, yes, you're restricting carbohydrates therapeutically, but you're not missing them, and that's the difference. You don't feel restricted. So I find this approach works extremely well in practice with my clients, and particularly the ones who have struggled long-term on and off diets their whole lives. We just have to remember what the big picture is, and that we want to make this a lifestyle. We've got our reasons for doing it. So on that note, my team and I at DNA Nutrition Group, we've put together a program that's online. So we would address normally the education around low carb eating and the appropriate meal and snack choices and all that type of thing. And then we would also address the behavioural issues and the habit change aspect, because I believe the two really go together. Now, if you'd like any further information or if you want to connect with me, I would love that. These are the details. You can find DNA Nutrition Group on Facebook or Instagram, and my account is at lowcarbhealthyfat.dietitian on Instagram, or Liz Forsyth APD. Feel free to shoot me a message. I'd love to get in touch. And I hope that you've got some tools and information today that you can actually put into practice, and that you'll find useful in allowing you to continue this low carb lifestyle and feel a bit more freer, like it's not a rigid approach that you're fixed into. And I think it's the best way of eating all around. So I hope you enjoy the benefits for a long time too. Thanks for watching, and have a good day. Bye for now.